Good evening. Great to have you with us tonight. It's always a pleasure to get to spend a little time on Wednesday night with you. I just got some great news. A friend of mine who I've been praying about, and many of you who know me, you've seen my prayer requests for my friend Rick. We got some good news today. Not out of the woods, but good news. And at this point, we'll take any good news we can get. So I'm just very excited and very pumped and just so happy that there's good news about my friend Rick today. Had an interesting time today. We had a wonderful time at our youth lunch today at Spaghetti, which is always a great day. Anytime we have spaghetti. Hello, Cohen. Good morning to you, my friend. We had spaghetti today at the youth lunch, and we decided to have a little fun. So we set up a table with some candles on it and some flowers. And we had spaghetti and meatballs, and we put a plate in between the kids, and we had the kids come in and reenact the spaghetti meatball scene from Lady and the Tramp. We didn't have the really long spaghetti noodles, so we couldn't do that. We couldn't do that scene. Probably wouldn't have been a good idea. But we did the thing where they rolled the meatball across the table with their noses. And if you're on our Facebook page, which if you're watching this, you might be, you can see that kids had a lot of fun with it. The adults had a lot of fun with it, and that just was a fun thing. I was talking to the kids today. One of the things that I did this morning was I got to look at just kind of the history. You ever look at your memories in Facebook? Well, if you go online, you can find what happened this day in history. And I found out that this day, October 16th in 1962, that's just a few years before I was born, is a very significant day. It was October 16th, 1962. 57 years ago today, that the USSR and Cuba came to this agreement where the Russians were going to park some nuclear missiles down there in Cuba, just to keep an eye on them, just down there, just kind of get them in the Cuban area there, about 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and the America just got really upset about that. Now that is what we call the height of the Cold War, and I was sharing that with the kids, and some of them actually knew that. I said, you know what's significant about today? And one of them actually got it right, and one of the teachers with us got it right today also. But growing up with that, because I was born about years after that happened, and growing up in that, we had that fear of the Cold War. We had that fear that at any given moment, someone was going to push a button, whether in Russia or in Washington or in Cuba, and suddenly we were all going to be wiped out. We lived with that fear. I remember growing up, my dad was cleaning out his stuff one time, and I came across this book that was instructions on how to build a bomb shelter. My dad had a book of instructions on how to build a bomb shelter. We did not have a basement in our house. We had a crawl space. I don't know where he was thinking he was going to put a bomb shelter, but he had instructions on how he could get a bomb shelter put together, because that was the kind of fear that we lived with back then during the Cold War. When I was in high school, there was a movie, and it was a made-for-TV movie, and I still remember the night it was on. Some of you may be old enough to remember this also. The movie was called The Day After, and it was all about the day after the big nuclear war. This Holocaust has occurred, and cities have been bombed. The special effects were just absolutely incredible for their time. But everybody, this was back when this used to happen, everybody went home that night and watched that movie. They were terrified. People had nightmares for a long time after that movie. That's the kind of fear that we lived with back then during the Cold War. Pardon me while I find my Bible. And I was telling the kids about that. And then I took them to just that wonderful little verse in 2 Timothy chapter 1, where Paul writes to his friend Timothy, and he tells him in verse 7, God gave us not a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of self-control. God gave us not a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love, a spirit of power, a spirit of love, and a spirit of self-control. Fear is a really bad motivator. Fear will only take you so far. Fear will promote one of two responses. I'm sure you've heard this before. There is the fight or flight. But no matter what fear causes you to do, you will take your eyes off of what's important when you put your eyes on your fear. You immediately lose focus. You develop tunnel vision. You can't see the things that are around you. Fear is an awful motivator also, because your body and your mind can only take that kind of stress for so long, and then after a while it just doesn't work anymore, and it doesn't do anything. God doesn't use fear. And maybe that's a reality you've not been accustomed to hearing. But God is not a God who promotes your devotion through your fear of Him. He gives you Himself. He gives you this power. He gives you this love. He gives you this self-control. Fear won't get you there. There's a lot of times we find ourselves motivated by fear. Maybe it's fear of change. Maybe it's fear of being alone. Maybe it's fear of being around other people. But those fears can only take us so far. And God doesn't want us to fear Him. He wants us to know the spirit of power, the spirit of love, the spirit of self-control. That was our high school kids this morning. And then this evening, in our Wednesday night group, we're watching through Max Lucado's Traveling Light series, which is a series that Max has done on the 23rd Psalm. And tonight we were looking at verse 4. And going from that fear this morning to what God has to say in verse 4 of the 23rd Psalm. Let me turn directly to it and get every word absolutely right. I've probably got it memorized anyway, but we're just going to go ahead and read it just for the sake of flipping to it. Verse 4, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The beautiful thing about our Wednesday night group is we had people in that group tonight who have been through that valley. They've been through that valley with their loved ones. They've been through that valley with spouses. They've been through that valley with friends. We had a man there tonight who is walking through that valley in cancer right now. We're praying for him, and our best hopes and best wishes are for his healing. And it is just a wonderful thing to see these people who have been there in that valley talk about how they don't have that fear anymore. Somehow, John's the one that tells us, perfect love drives out fear. And by spending their lives drawing closer to Jesus, by spending their lives drawing closer to God, they've come to put away that fear and find only love. Thank you, Cohen. Friendship, love always wins. Thank you very much. Let's take a moment and pray, and then I want to tell you a little bit about what's coming up this Sunday. Let me pray for you. Father, I don't know what my friends' fears are, but we've all got fears. Sometimes it's the fears of the unknown. Sometimes it's fears of the known. Sometimes it's fears of things and even people who are very close to us. But you come to us and you tell us you have not given us a spirit of fear, but you have given us that spirit. I just want to focus on that spirit of love, that perfect love that drives out fear. And in the most frightening moments we can imagine, that valley of the shadow of death, you promise to be with us in that moment. And if you will be with us in that moment, all those other moments that promote fear, that provoke us to fear, how will you not be with us in those also? We thank you for your presence. We thank you for the love you've shown us. We thank you for the way you showed us that love through your Son, Jesus. It's in His name we pray. Amen. So coming up this Sunday at Kansas Christian Church, a very special Sunday. This Sunday, we're having a potluck. First of all, we're having a potluck after church. It is the Pastor Appreciation Potluck. I appreciate being appreciated with a potluck. It's one of my favorite things that we get to do, is we get to share a meal together. Pastor Appreciation Potluck this Sunday. Sammy Maremi, a very dear friend who used to serve here at Kansas. Sammy, who is a missionary back to he goes back to his homeland. He goes back to Kenya and serves there. Sammy is going to be with us telling us about what's happening in Kenya through his organization, Share International. I'm excited to hear how things are going with Sammy. And this coming Sunday, we've got a surprise. I'm just going to leave it at that. there's going to be a surprise this coming Sunday, and I'm very excited about it. I would love to see you here at Kansas for our surprises and for our time together. Wherever you are, whatever you're experiencing right now, you're not going through it alone. You have a God who loves you very much. In those moments when you're feeling fear, turn to Him and let Him remind you of His perfect love that drives that fear out. God bless. Have a great week.